Hello, Internet. It's time for another Wednesday's serial. Let's dig in. Green Arrow 36, we have the second issue of the new guard taking over, and it is not what the comic once was. It definitely is much more reminiscent of the show. It's definitely kind of the Green Arrow that is more modeled after the show, which is a harsh contrast compared to where this book just was. From the last issue, it feels a lot more of that ilk, but it should be interesting to see what happens with the next issue, because we're going to get the introduction of our first real supervillain mixed in with kind of this new guard, and I feel like that's going to be kind of a telling thing whether or not this comic is going to be worth my while. If you're kind of on the fence, I feel like this is a decent comic. It's one of the few big two that's still $2.99. It's a fierce mediocre and not much else. I mean, the art's there, the story's there, and it's moving along, and it's doing a lot more than a lot of other comics in that it feels like this is its own deal and not much else is going to touch it. So that's exciting in that right. Future's End, this cover actually kind of touches on the end of the issue, but a lot of it dealing with Tim Drake Culloden. I feel like too much time has been spent on that story arc recently, and I don't know, it's an interesting idea, but it's kind of subdued, and it's better if you only touch on it, don't delve in the way that they have, whereas there's like an invasion going on in Cadamus Island that doesn't seem to be getting a lot of detail, or Batman meeting Batman Beyond in this issue gets rushed through, or the fact that there's kind of a bizarre setup with the Plastique character that Batman Beyond's running with that kind of gets glanced over, or the fact that there's the relationship between Tim Drake and Lois Lane that's finally coming to a bit more of a head, and that will never pay off anymore because they did rush through that. I don't know, I'm still enjoying this book, but I feel like it's not even necessarily a pacing problem as much as it is the amount of time devoted to what story and what they feel is the most interesting inherently isn't. And we're playing with a lot of B characters, but it's a lot of the Bat Universe characters that are still getting the most attention, and they don't deserve it, especially in this book. The story's begging for other characters to get more page time. It's not given to them. It's my biggest complaint, but it's still a fun story, and it's moving forward, and hopefully it's something that we move past. So it's been interesting, and it's kind of crazy. I think this is already 27 issues in. Batman Eternal 31 is really awesome. The cover does really depict the main part of this issue, and it's Alfred running with Bane through the sewers of Gotham in this prison break that's been happening, and it's even more awesome than that. This is such an incredible issue and such a great moment, because I can't be the only one who loves Alfred Pennyworth more than a lot of other characters, and to get a payoff issue like this where you get reminded that Alfred is one of the most BA characters around, this was really cool. Had some definite, honest to God, shock moments to me, because it was dealing with some B characters, and the way that they played a few things, honestly, I didn't see coming. There's small little references to like Batwing and stuff that are picking up, so you're seeing where the story's playing along with other things that we're going to get in a couple of coming issues. So I feel like this issue wouldn't have worked so well if we had to wait a month, and then it's like, what was that one line character? You wouldn't even remember, but because it's coming out, it's going, this is working, and it is still the best Bat book going, just because we're getting to do so much, and it is grand, not because they're making it so epic, but because they're able to delve into so much with so many characters, and it honestly is epic for that. So the scale matches the story, and I think that's cool. Not to say that there aren't falling points, and I could see some people having issues with the art in this book, though honestly I think you'd be remiss to knock down the art in this book. It's not the most amazing we've seen necessarily, but it fits the book. So yeah, there you be. Ho Spider-Verse. I This is so perfect for me. If you're a fan of Spider-Man at all, this is incredible. If you're kind of a fan of multiverse stuff and kind of when comics get kind of crazy like that, this overarching thing is for you. I know there's a ton of spin-offs, and they're making it as big as almost any other Marvel event just with Spider-Man, but I'm on board. It's Spider-Man Multiverse. This is the crazy fun stuff that I remember comics being about, and I kind of forgot. And this is here, and it's just like, what? Ben Reilly from Another Earth? Why not? Spider-Ham? Yeah, he's in this story. Like, Mayday Parker? Oh, yeah. The Scarlet Spider? Yeah, it's just like all this crazy Spider-Verse stuff coming to a head, and then a few twists on characters that should be one way or another. It's basically the biggest Exiles story ever told, except it's purely Spider-Man stuff. And it's also an interesting point because you get a pure evil defensive Spider-Man completely, not necessarily Spider-Man completely in the right, because he's always usually completely in the right, but this is a thing of survival, and Spider-Man gets to unload and go full nuts. There's no restraint in this book, which is something that's very rare in a Spider-Man book, where it's not even a moral tale. It's just Spider-Man has to fight this character to survive, and it's this essentially two gangs of Morloons, which are the Morloon family, which is, they're playing it kind of like vampires, but it's not like Dracula vampires. It's, they feast on the spider. It's something attuned specifically to Spider-Man. So it's like the vampire of the spider totem, whatever. And it's just this crazy heightened... It's the sort of thing you don't normally see in a Spider-Man book, and it makes it so it's just crazy and fun and over the top. This is crazy, and this is like the third or fourth big play Dan Slott's made with Spider-Man, and whereas the Superior Spider-Man went and ended a bit weakly because they were rushing to get back into Peter Parker because of the movie, but we're here now, and if you're not excited about this, I don't know. And what's really, really cool about this Spider-Verse story and the way they're setting it up is it has to have some sort of definitive ending. They can't just whittle something out. And yeah, maybe one of the Morloons, whatever, survived and they'll come back later, of course. But this story has to have a definitive ending, which is really exciting. It's so stilted, it's so its own thing, and it's so big, it has to come down and it has to end, which means this is going to be a crazy moment, and I think this is going to play off better than Spider Island did. This is going to play off better than Superior really did in the end. I think this is going to be kind of the crown of Dan Slott's run. I'm really hoping, and I'm really putting my eggs in a basket on this, but I'm genuinely excited about a comic event, and it feels kind of good, and I'm willing to waive the price of admission, like you guys know I normally don't, because holy shit, this is awesome. I didn't get the tie-in this week because my shop ran out, but it's on order for me, so meh. I also have to catch up on some other Spider-Man stuff I haven't read, so I know there's like Mech Spider-Man and Spider-Gwen and that whole deal. Should be interesting. Deadpool's Art of War. I didn't know quite what to make of the first issue, but it was fun and it was interesting. It was crazy. This issue was more fun and more crazy, more with the... But we're halfway through now because it's 2 of 4, but oh my gosh, I kind of get it now. Deadpool's trying to sell this Art of War book, but he gets caught up in Asgard, and he's trying to get Loki to declare war on Earth so that there'll be this crazy war and he can sell a book. But once Loki catches wind that he's trying to sell a book, which is, in a weird way, kind of Loki's action doing this whole thing for another bizarre outcome. Deadpool gets thrown into a dungeon, and he's talking to Thor, and Thor, like, kind of gets this weird respect for Deadpool along the way, and I'd be remiss not to really point out the art in this issue, because it's very much its own thing, but when you get panels like this, it's kind of the Simonson, but also kind of the Kirby, like, you're getting all the, I guess the term would be iconography, just all the visuals of the stuff from Thor, and the rainbows there, and all this, and it really plays in Thor's land, but it's so definitively a Deadpool book, and it just, the merging of it looks amazing, and Deadpool in it looks really awesome for a while, because he gets this, bizarre Asgardian helmet, which comes through, and man, this book is really awesome. If you're looking to try a Deadpool mini, I could not recommend one above Deadpool's Art of War. This is some of the best Deadpool stuff I've ever read. Chew 44. This is a relatively big issue. If independent, self-contained, better, if you will, comics had key issues, this would be one of the ones for Chew. No question. One of the biggest battles happens in here, and what's really interesting is throughout the run, there's kind of been some visual cues for ongoing jokes that they do. They play off of and use pretty much every one of them in this issue as well. In a lot of ways, I feel like that's telling of things are going to be a little different here on out, given that if everything is as it appears, about half our cast is gone. So, in one way or another. So, that could literally just be half of one of the cast in a couple cases. This was a crazy drop-down action-packed issue, which was cool, but at the same time left me a little wanting because it ran quick. And no letters page. Just notes on how they went through, which is cool too. This was awesome, and now I'm getting the sense that because the way Chew is put out, in 5-issue chunks, this is 4 or 5 of this chunk. I have a feeling the next issue will merely be dealing with the fallout of this one, and then I feel like we're going to be in our third act for the story afterwards. So, since it's only supposed to run 60-ish issues, if my knowledge is correct, we would be kind of coming around to kind of the last chunk, because 45 and then, 15 issues. So, hopefully, I'm really hoping... Well, I'm hoping Chew lasts at least a little longer, but at the same time, I want nothing more for it than to end strong, and then to see both of these creators go on to do other good comics and not just try to drag this one thing out because it sells well. Because I feel like as much as people do love Chew and is one of the more notable outside of the big two comics, and has been for a lot longer than this Image Renaissance really has been around, I feel like these guys have gotten enough notoriety that they could go on to do other things and be just as, if not more, successful than to try to cash in on Chew endlessly. And near as I can tell, that's their mentality too, but they want this project to be right on, which is why Layman left Batman Eternals, so there you be. Copperhead 2 is a really interesting dive and kind of difference from your, I'm going to call it average Image comic at this point. This is totally a space western, which, you know, you want to say sci-fi, but it's not sci-fi like most of the other books are. It's just backdrop for taking what would be a really hard-hitting western and dressing it up in a way that makes it a lot more palatable and a lot more fun to read, and gives a little bit of flavor, so it's not just kind of rote. But what's interesting is it's not a tone, it's a flavor to this comic that's different from the first issue that I was definitely picking up on, but it's explained very clearly in the back. This issue, because apparently the writer works multimedia and is writing a TV show, wrote the first issue full script, and the creators worked on the second issue Marvel style, meaning that they kind of had an intermediary and kind of had the pictures come in the words after, assuming that they did truly mean Marvel style. They don't spell out exactly, but that's what that means. So it kind of shows that there's a creative difference, yet still there's so much in this issue, and I'm wondering if some of it came out because of that style. There's definitely a couple moments where world building happens flawlessly, where something's explained in two characters trying to figure out the case that's something that's unique to this alien race that you wouldn't know, but it's just, they just talk about it matter-of-factly, but they're like, this is that. It's an item that the family has of this alien race, and it's essentially has no value. It's not worth a lot of money, but it's a sacred family keepsake sort of thing. But because it's sacred, it's valuable to someone, right? And right there, you're like, okay. And it's just, you know, 2 lines of dialogue, and you're like, holy crap, I'm so much more in this world. And it's not a big deal. It's just part of the story moving along. And some kids get taken down, and partially because the mom's in a jail cell and she's looking at the sheriff. She's like, tears in the eye. You know, how would you feel if you weren't there to protect your children? And it's just, holy crap. It's just like these moments, and they're there, and it's as visual as it is verbal, and it's all coming, and it's just, wow. And this is quickly shaking up to be one of the Image comics that you need to be getting month to month, because do you want to miss out on this? I mean, obviously it's going to read a little bit better in trade, but I don't have the patience to wait. This book is knocking it out, whereas a lot of the other Image books I really enjoy, but they're so esoteric in the way they're written, or they're so disjointed that really hunkering down and reading a trade at a time gives it so much more meaning. Whereas here, I'm following along, I'm just, I can't wait. So, woohoo. And then I'm going to rest this serial on Tooth and Claw. If you didn't pick this up, why? I'm not going to say it's the greatest comic I read even a week or anything, but this cover art is held throughout the issue. It is quite simply one of the most gorgeous comics I've ever looked at. And it's 48 pages, no ads, $3. Like, it's just wow. It's definitely truly high fantasy. If you've been looking for any sort of true fantasy, if you're dying on Umbral, if you were suffering through Demon Knights, you need to actually pick up this comic. If that is your jam, this is where you need to be. And it's interesting because I don't think Image, at least not of late, has done true high fantasy. I know that there's been Skull Kickers and Rat Queens. Those are D&D games transcribed and dressed up. This is fantasy. And the use of the anthropomorphic characters is spot on. Something about which character is which animal representation hits a certain true note. I'd have to run through my totems again, but the spirit, if you will, or the characterization of each of those animal characters fits and works and feels correct. And as such, it adds a depth to this comic, whereas usually I find that device not played as well when it's used in Blacksad, when it's used in Mouse. Something always feels a bit helter-skelter about it. It just is never quite right. Here it is right, and that is no small feat by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not sure I'm fully grasping this comic yet. I'm not sure I'm even completely on board, because high fantasy on this level is not usually so much what I'm interested in, but this is such a crafted and quality comic that it deserves some attention. So truly, if you're looking for something like this, it's finally here, and this is so much of what Image is doing right. This is a genre that I don't think has been touched on in comics in years, if not decades, really. And here we are. Here we are today, and here it is for you. So I really hope not only that if you're into high fantasy that you'll pick this up, but if you know someone who's into high fantasy, someone who's really into, say, The Lord of the Rings or Arthurian myth or whatever level of that high fantasy it is, draw them in. This might be the comic to pull in that kind of reader, because there's a certain use of language and a certain use of tradition and culture in a way that's present in this comic that I think would really register with some and not with others. So there's my rambly 2 cents. Y'all have a good week, and I'll catch you soon. Talk, comics.